So what we're going to talk about today is rabbis and where they get the chutzpah to think that they should be in charge. But Milda's asked, where do the rabbis come from? So I'm going to try to sketch that out. And he set me a limit of 2 minutes, which is
For a rabbi, it's impossible.
inadequate. Okay. After the Hasmoneans have taken control of Judah, and they're an independent nation for about 4 years, and then they go under someone else's control again, different segments of society start separating out. Josephus tells us that there were the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. They all had different beliefs, okay? The Sadducees was a sect or a subgroup that followed a priestly philosophy, and they had a set of beliefs, and the set of beliefs was the Torah is the Torah, and there is no life after death. Those are the major things that I'm bothering to remember, okay? The Pharisees are the group that became the rabbis, and the Pharisees had a set of beliefs. They had this notion of oral law, that there's 2 Torahs, and life after death, and they said that individuals should take upon themselves the rules of purity, washing hands and this and that is supposed to be only for the priests. So they said that, and I'm doing a very broad brush, but basically the rabbi's notion was, in the same way that priests behave towards the sacrifice and the temple, we should behave towards our meals and our homes. The Essenes were aesthetics. They didn't necessarily believe in having children. I don't care about them, so I don't know much about them. I'm being honest. But it's from the Essenes that you probably get the Qumran people, and also where you get the early Christians. And the Zealots were people who were really infatuated with Israeli or Judean independence. They were the Sicarii. Sicarii is named after the kind of knife they had. Those are the groups that are active around the time that the story of Jesus is going around. Okay? When the temple's destroyed, all these guys are in Jerusalem. This is now, I'm outside my 2 minutes. They've got enough supplies in Jerusalem for a long siege. The Zealots burn all of the supplies in order to force the other guys to go out and fight now. The Zealots later on go off and they're wiped out, kill themselves at Masada. When the temple is destroyed, the Sadducees, everything's based upon the temple. So they've got nothing to go on. The Essenes have Christianity, and the rabbis have rabbinic Judaism, and they've got something that actually works. Okay, that's kind of the early origins. Now, if you want to go back earlier than that, at some point, people were studying Bible, and the rabbis were coming from this Bible study group. Okay.
So it was like from the first diaspora that where the rabbis came up with this thing about we don't need the temple because they had to live without the temple for a while. So
the rabbis are very keen on the return of the temple as an official policy. But what they're saying is that, and this may be David Cantor making this up, but it works and no one's told me I'm flat out wrong. there's God in the individual, right? And the way that the sacrificial system works is the individual gives money to support the temple, sacrifices are offered, and as a result, God gives grace. Which means for an individual, you don't have to do much. And the rabbis are like, I need something more. I want to have some interaction. So I want to have like prayer and study and ritual, because then I'm going to feel more connected, right? Because if I'm out in the middle of Shlobotka, which I wouldn't be because that's in Russia or Ukraine, but if I'm out in the middle of not Jerusalem and I want to feel connection to, God, just sending in my shekel is not going to help. And there's probably most of the laws of kashrut are probably from the rabbis because a lot of it's not in the Bible. And so they're basically separate systems. They separate out. They are going to have a restricted diet. They're going to have restricted activity, and they're basically restrictions. Same thing as the Essenes, except they believe in having children. So that's always positive. If you're gonna have a religious cult, don't have one that doesn't believe in children, because then you die out. The rabbis evolve. So it used to be the priests were in charge of the court system. The rabbis usurp the priest's role, and then it's the rabbis who become the judges. Right? So if you go to our earlier history, originally, in the Sinai Desert, Moses is the judge, and then he has, delegates people. And then in the when they conquer the land in Joshua's time, the judges are judges, right? When we meet Devorah, she's under her palm tree and she's giving judgment. She's settling dispute. They're the dispute settlers. Okay, and then when you get into the era of the kings, then the kings are the ones who settled the disputes, right? Solomon and the baby and all that stuff. When they come back from the diaspora, from Babylon, at that point, it's the scribes. Like Ezra, right? Ezra is a scribe, right? And at this point, after Babylon, authority is flowing from Torah, because they now have Torah written down. And authorities, so it's a text-based authority system. And in a text-based authority system, the people who master the text are in charge. So the Sadducees are masters of the texts. And the rabbis say, not only are we master of the text, but there's a whole other text that you guys don't even know about that we're masters of. And then after these guys are no longer running concern, we say, by the way, we're going to tell our version of history. And in our version of history, these guys didn't know the text very well. Because, when the high priest was going to go and do the ritual, he had to be instructed by the rabbis because he might have been an idiot. And they weren't too wrong, because the priests, at that point, the high priest was someone who was appointed by the overlords, like the Syrians or whomever. And how you got to be the high priest is you're the one who gave the better bribe. And yeah, some of these high priests were Hellenists, and they wanted to Hellenize, and that's why the Maccabees rose up in the first place, right? The problem the Maccabees had wasn't that Antiochus that the Antiochus wanted to, Epiphanes wanted to, be mean to the Jews. It's because the guy who was one to be the high priest, he was a Hellenizer. He was essentially a Reformed Jew who wanted to have the gymnasium and all those Greek learning type things, and the Maccabees are kind of like Talibanist type, in terms of their approach to Torah, and they come and say, we need to fight. So Hanukkah isn't really about us versus the Greeks, or it's us versus the Greeks, but the Greeks we're talking about are the Hellenized Jews. Okay, it's the triumph of orthodoxy over reform, way back then, which is why it's so ironic that the Reformed Jews love, because, right, but even then when the rabbis are retelling the story of Hanukkah, they repackage Hanukkah and they say, well, it's not all about the whole Hellenization thing, it's the miracle of the oil, which nobody bothered to write about because it's a fantasy, okay? Straight up, it's a fantasy.
They had to have an explanation, so they invented.
Right, well, they had to have an alternate explanation.
I like it.
Right, I mean, why is we're on the cusp of Hanukkah, why is Hanukkah 8 days long? No! Makes no sense, the story makes no sense.
They had to get their troops together.
No, it makes no sense. They've already won.
Had to repair the temple.
No, it's very simple. All you have to do is look at the prayer book and you'll understand, okay?
Which one, the Haggadah you're talking about?
No! The Siddur.
Oh,
Look at the instructions for Hallel. Hallel comes in two forms, full Hallel and half Hallel. Full Hallel, all the Psalms. Half Hallel, skip half the Psalms. When do you do the full Hallel? You do the full Hallel on the festivals, and the festivals are Passover, Sukkot, and Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And the half one you do on Rosh Chodesh. But on Chol HaMoed, the days between the festival, you know how Pesach has Chag at the beginning and Chag at the end, and there's days in between?
Written Pesach.
And Sukkot has Chag at the beginning and Shmini Atzeret at the end. At Pesach, you do full Hallel during the, Pesach, you do half Hallel and Chol HaMoed. But on Sukkot, you do full Hallel on all the days of Chol HaMoed. And, forgetting for a moment, I don't even know if we do Hallel and Purim or not, but I don't care. On Hanukkah, you do full Hallel on all the days of Hanukkah, which raises the question, how come the days of Hanukkah, which aren't even Chag, are treated at a higher level of Hallel than the middle days of Pesach, which is, my God, Pesach is the foundation of our tradition, right? Why do we do anything? Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, because we were out from Egypt, okay? The reason Hanukkah has full Hallel and every day is because if you look in the book of Maccabees, written by Jews for Jews, but passed on by the rabbis, passed over. The book of Maccabees, on the 25th of Kislev, they rededicate the temple. What is their first action upon rededicating the temple? Oh, we missed Sukkot. Let's celebrate it now. So they do the Maccabean Sukkot, and they celebrate 8 days of Sukkot. Late. The next year, they send out letters.
See, Milton, you knew there was a reason.
Letters like the Book of Maccabees, and in their letters they say, hey, last year, we did a great job, we overthrew, we took control, we celebrated 8 days of late Sukkot. You guys out there in the diaspora, we would like you to do 2 things. Also celebrate our Maccabean Sukkot, and send money. Which did it. So, in the Talmud, when they say, my Hanukkah, what's Hanukkah? They say Hanukkah is an 8-day festival. They don't talk, and they say, why is it 8 days? Because the oil lasted for 8 days. What oil? In the Book of Maccabees, there's one reference to oil. The reference is they went to the place where the eternal flame or whatever the flame thing, the altar, all that, that stuff, and they found this gunk that was remnants of the earlier, and so they used that when lighting because then it would have a continuation of what was went before. That was probably naphtha, which is like kerosene. So that's neft. So that's where that comes from. That's a little bit of a digression. You see what you did? Got me totally off topic.
No,
Gosh.
it led us to an answer for this question. What was that question?
Where the rabbis come from?
Where do rabbis come?
They come from the land of I make things up.
No, I don't think.
Not no, they make things up.
things up.
Yeah, never
But
ask
doesn't
a
it-
rat.
It means teacher, right? That's what.
Yeah, or
what
great.
Mohammed is.
It means great one.
A
The great one.
Muhammad
Oh, we'll have to call it
Muhammad
the
is a
great one.
teacher. Malamed is teacher. Okay. So, by the way, just about on this notion of oral law, okay? So, in the British American legal system, there's this notion of the common law. And common law has 2 aspects. It's what's already been written down in cases and things, and stuff we've yet to discover. Because in a case, a judge can say, I think this is a principle of common law, and just create it out of nothing. Good example of that, in England, but not in this country because you had legislation to do it, was negligence. Negligence is based upon the neighbor principle. Because it's in Britain, OUR, neighbor principle. You have a woman who buys a bottle of ginger beer. And in her bottle of ginger beer, she finds a snake. And she, so she sues. And they say, look, you asked for a bottle of ginger beer, we gave you a bottle of ginger beer. Well, you should have had some care. Why? So the judge, in this case, in this case, says, no, there's a principle of law. you have to have a mind to not damage your neighbor. But once he's enunciated it, now we have this concept. The Supreme Court of the United States does this all the time.
Like privacy is.
Just, where did that come from? Okay, it's useful, till it wasn't. Okay, so the rabbis have this notion of oral law. And in our text, we will learn that they say this oral law comes from Mount Sinai. But come on, they have to be inventing it some of the time. They really have to, okay?
Like the McDonald's lady got burnt with the coffee. She should have known. Common sense says it's gonna be hot.
No.
But she lost.
No,
She
no.
won and they
She
appealed
won,
it.
yeah, but here,
And
look,
then she lost
It's
on
very-
appeal.
yeah, but the principle is this, right? They should have known
It was gonna be-
that, okay,
It was all.
my car right now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cup holders? 10 cup holders, okay? My father's, well, my last car had 1 cup holder, the driver. And my previous car had,
Zero.
Absolutely.
when the woman sued McDonald's, there were cup holders in cars, and the way that you held your cup was between your knees on your lap. And of course, if you're gonna buy a coffee and it's scalding and hot enough to scald you, McDonald's had to have known that they were gonna cause damage because cup holders hadn't been invented. And I'd be willing to say that the reason that there are 10 cup holders in my car that only seats 7 people is because of that case. Okay.
Never ask a rabbi the time of day, because
God.
they'll teach you about the sundial and the grandfather clock and all that.
Well, it's like backgammon. You ever play backgammon?
Once, I think.
So backgammon has 2 dice, and it has 2 sets of 15 stones, and it has 4 quarters each of 6, and it represents time. So they're the hours of the day, the stones are the days of the month, and the 2 dice are the sun and the moon.
Sounds pretty historic. It sounds early man with stones and sundial.
Okay,
Oh,
so where do rabbis get the chutzpah to think that they have anything in charge? Answer. Let's go back to our old favorite, Deuteronomy 17, verses 8 through 13. If a case is too baffling, be it a controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your coast, you shall promptly repair to the place that your God, Adonai, will have chosen, and appear before the Levitical priests, or the magistrate in charge at the time, to carry out the verdict, and you should do this. Should the party to the dispute act presumptuously and disregard the priest charged with serving your people, the party shall die. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I missed a line. You shall act in accordance with the instructions given you and the ruling handed down to you. You must not deviate from the verdict that they announced to you, either to the right or to the left. So 2 concepts here. Number 1, you go to the magistrate. Number 2, don't deviate right or left. Okay? Helene, you're looking like,
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I'm just,
yeah, no, tell me.
well, first of all, the thing about go to the priest or to the magistrate at that time, it sounds almost as if somebody added that in maybe in a later version when they were writing it.
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think it was written at a time when there were magistrates, but this is being written way before the rabbis.
Yeah.
Way before the rabbis. They're just taking advantage of it. It's way before, okay? Okay, so that's nice. How do the rabbis justify themselves? So, Mishnah Avot. Avot is, Pirkei Avot is an interesting part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, as we may recall, is the earliest layer of writings of the rabbis. Pirkei Avot is the earliest layer of the Mishnah, and Pirkei Avot is different from everything else in the Mishnah because it doesn't have any discussion of law. It has a discussion of principles. And this is how it starts out. Moses received the Torah at Sinai, transmitted to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets the men of the great assembly.
And they all had to learn it before they could pass it.
Right, I mean, but it's a chain of transmission.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then what Mishnah Avot goes on to say is, and this is what they taught. And the stuff that they teach ain't in the Torah that we have written down. It's the oral rulings, right? Always give the benefit of doubt. Raise up many students. Stuff that's not in there. But what they're saying is that this is this oral tradition, okay? Now, how do you get from Mount Sinai to the rabbis? So let's have Maimonides help us out here, okay? So the Mishnah Torah is Maimonides' great text of law. And what Maimonides is trying to do is trying to rescue us from the insanity that is Jewish law. Because Jewish law is disorganized and incoherent. Because if I want to find out what the law is about weddings, I can look in the Bible and it gives me 4 lines about divorce and nothing much more. And if I look in the Mishnah, it's going to be all over the place. And if I look at the Talmud, it's going to be all over the place because the Talmud is like the beginning of this class, an all over the place digression fest, okay? Where do you find the laws of acquiring I want to get a set of, I want to acquire a set of teacups from you. Where do I find the law governing that? Under marriage, of course. This is how a man acquires a wife. Oh, this is how a man acquires a slave. Oh, this is how a man acquires an animal. Oh, this is how an animal acquires movable objects. Oh, this is how a man acquires immovable objects. Oh, so of course it's there, but it's also, it's all over the place. Plus, in the Talmud, Rabbi Ashi said this, Ravina said that, Rabbi Shimon said this, the rabbi said that, and it's like, what was the conclusion? So Maimonides says, I'm going to write a code of law. And in my code of law, it's going to be organized, and organize it into different sections, and it'll have like a logical flow, and I'll tell you the answers. It's got this great set, right? It needs an introduction. The introduction has to explain why is it that we have the system in general. And here's his introduction, okay? The mitzvot given to Moses at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations as implied by Exodus, and I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah, and the mitzvah. Okay, the Torah, that's the written law. The mitzvah, that is the explanation. So it says in the Bible that Moses was told, here is the law and here's the reasoning behind it. Write down the law and I'll tell you the reasoning behind it. You give the written law to the people and you relay the reasons to Joshua. And Joshua will tell it to the priests, and the priests will tell it to the sages, and so on and so forth. Okay? That's where the oral law comes from. Okay. Moses, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died, takes the Torah scroll, gives it to each tribe, and the mitzvah, the explanation, he doesn't transcribe. He commands it to the elders, Joshua, Israel, right? Be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you. Great. Now, all the sages who are mentioned, and then he goes through a list of all the sages from Joshua through, it's like pages and pages of sages. So I edited that out. All the sages who are mentioned were leaders of their generations. Among them were the heads of the academies, heads of the exile, members of the great Sanhedrin. Together with them in each generation, there were thousands and myriads that heard their teachings. This is common knowledge, right? The intent of both Talmuds is to elucidate the Mishnah and to explain it, okay? From the entire body of knowledge stemming from the two Talmuds, from the Tosefta is the Mishnah parts that didn't make it into the Mishnah. The Sifra and the Sifrei, also parts that didn't make it in. You can derive the forbidden, the permitted, the pure, the impure, liability, not liable, valid, invalid. Okay, this is a chain all the way back to Moses and Sinai. Also, those sources relate to those matters that were decreed by the sages. Sometimes they had to add to it. They had to build fences around the Torah. These are regulations, if you will, right? I've explained the notion of a fence around the Torah, right? Here's the example. Let's pretend that this is a candle. You're not allowed to light fire on Shabbat. So this is a candle. What's the only thing I can do with a candle? Violate Shabbat. I can light a candle, that would violate Shabbat. So in order to prevent me from accidentally violating Shabbat, I mean, maybe I have a lot of static electricity and I touch it and the light's on fire, I don't know. A fence around the Torah is, you can't touch that candle on Shabbat. You want to put a fence around that fence? You can't move the table that the candle's sitting on. You want to put a fence around that fence? You can't go into the room that has a table that has a candle. That one I'm making up, okay? But it's like, you go to rabbinical school, then you go home for Shabbos dinner with your family. It's like, Mom, you can't have the Shabbos candles on the tablecloth. Why? If you have your Shabbos candles on the table, we can't take the tablecloth off the table because you can't move the candles because we can't touch the candles. You need to put the candles on a different surface. Or you could put the candles on a tray.
Oh, well, yeah.
And then on the tray, you could put some challah.
Okay.
And then I can move it because I'm moving the challah, and the candle happened to come with it.
In our house, when my mother lit candles on the table, it was always on a tray, along with the challah.
Yeah.
And my mother always said the bread has to stay on the table.
Yeah.
Because that was like
Yep.
the symbol of us being grateful for
Right,
having.
and it had to stay on the tray with the
Yeah,
candles.
yeah.
Well, that's why, okay? She didn't know why, she just did it, okay? Like, there are millions of people who light candles on Friday night. I have no reason why. They're all Spanish. Anyways. Okay. Fences, okay? And includes all the customs that each generation had, like, And then here's the thing, it's forbidden to deviate from those decisions, okay? And includes judgments that were not received from Moses, but rather by exegesis. Exegesis is when you derive principles from the Bible. Sages of the Mishnah composed other texts, all this wonderful stuff, okay? Thus Ravina, Rav Ashi, their colleagues represent the final era of the great sages of Israel who transmitted the oral law. They passed decrees, ordained practices, put in effect customs. These decrees, ordinances, customs spread out amongst the entire Jewish people in all the places where they lived, because these rabbis are active at the core of the Islamic world, and they've got the Islamic State on their side. The Islamic State is enforcing one version of Judaism, and they are it. Okay. So, after the court of Rav Ashi composed the Talmud, completed it, people became dispersed, and oh my goodness, there was strife. And travel became dangerous. Torah study decreased. Oh no, not everyone's as knowledgeable as used to be before. Instead, individuals, the remnants whom God called, would gather in each city and country, occupy themselves with Torah study, and devote themselves to understanding the text of the sages, learning every path of judgment from them. So now you've got localized learning, right? You no longer have the central authority, you have localized learning. Every court that was established after the conclusion of the Talmud, regardless of the country in which it was established, issued decrees, ordinances, customs for the people of that country, or of several countries. These practices, however, were not accepted throughout the Jewish people. You know, Ashkenaz, Sephard, the Jews of Rome, the Jews of Spain, the Jews of Greece. Everyone has their own different customs, okay? Because the distance between their settlements is a disruption of communication. Since each of these courts were considered to be individuals, and the high court of the Sanhedrin had been defunct. So people in one country could not be compelled to follow the practices of another country. What do you mean I can't have rice on Pesach? What's wrong with you? That's the way we do it at home, says the fellow from Spain, showing up in Germany. What's wrong with you people? Right? Similarly, if one of the Goanim interpreted the path of judgment a certain way, while the court after they had a different way, the opinion of the first need not be adhered to. Rather, whichever position appeared to be correct, whether the first or the last, is accepted. Right? You gotta, the court in its current time is gonna tell you what it is. These principles regarding judgments, decrees, ordinances, customs were established after the conclusion of Talmud. However, all matters mentioned by the Babylonian Talmud are incumbent upon the entire Jewish people to follow. We must compel each and every city and each country to accept all the customs that were put into practice by the sages of the Talmud, to pass decrees, paralleling their decrees, observe their ordinances, since all matters of the Babylonian Talmud were accepted by the entire Jewish people. So we all agree on what is Jewish religion up to the close of the Talmud, and after that, we disagree. Right? And you may recall that Yosef Karo in Israel says, here's Jewish law. And then Moshe Isserli says, oh, very nice. Here's Jewish law, and here's how we do it in my countries. Okay? And that's the Shulchan Aruch. Right? The Shulchan Aruch is about how law is done in the Sephardic world, with commentary by Moshe Isserli saying how we do it in the Ashkenazic world. It has both in it. Right? So, the sages established ordinances and decrees, put customs into practice, arrived at legal decisions, and that's how he justifies the whole system. Okay? Yay Maimonides, yay Rambam. Rambam doesn't know about the Shulchan Aruch because he wasn't alive. Okay. So let's go back in time. Let's look at the Tosefta on Sota. Now, Sota is the part of the Talmud and Mishnah that talks about the ritual of the bitter waters that you feed to the woman whose husband is jealous and thinks she's been cheating. If she drinks the water and she has been cheating, her tummy will sag and her thighs will expand.
Really? Oh, is that why?
It's in the Bible.
So you called it cheating.
And if she didn't cheat, then you should just go home and love your wife and just stop worrying.
I don't mean to be around.
I know. Yeah, it's very simple. If she gets pregnant, hey, she was cheating. Okay. Okay. So we need to separate ourselves from prophecy, because remember, prophecy is God tells you that prophecy is where new law comes from. The rabbis don't want new sources of law. They want to derive law. They don't want new law. They don't want a legislature hanging around imposing new things. They don't want the king coming up with new decrees. Okay. So from the time of the last prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi died, the Holy Spirit ceased to exist amongst Israel. Nevertheless, they would avail themselves of the divine voice, a bat kol. Okay? It so happened that the sages entered the upper chamber of Ben Guriah in Jericho, and a divine voice issued and said to them, "There is a man here among you who is worthy of the Holy Spirit, only that his generation does not merit it." They cast their eyes upon Hillel the elder. At the time of his death, they would say, "Alas, humble one, alas, righteous one, disciple of Ezra." So Hillel, who is like the root of what we call rabbinic Judaism, important guy. A voice from heaven said, "Hillel, you're on the right track." So there's some confirmation. There's some confirmation confirmed by the other people who were in the room at the time. Another time they were reclining in Yavna, and they heard a divine voice saying, "There's a man here who's worthy of the Holy Spirit being upon him, but his generation is not worthy of it." And they turned their eyes to Shmuel Hakatan. When he died, they would say, "Alas, humble one, alas, righteous one, disciple of the Hillel the elder." Okay, Hillel, the voice says, is righteous and knowledgeable. Hillel is representing the true tradition of Ezra. Shmuel Hakatan, oh, he's representing the true tradition, not of Ezra, but of Hillel. Right? We're anchoring it. And even he, at the time of his death, Shimon the righteous and Yishmael the high priest were destined to die. The rest of their colleagues to the sword, the rest will be upon it, and great strife will ensue. Okay. So the rabbis need to extricate themselves. They've justified themselves by the divine voice. They need to extricate themselves from the divine voice, right? Because if they want true authority, they need to have more authority than God. Because otherwise God could always interrupt. I mean, what's the point of my teaching you? What's the point of you listening to me if a moment from now God's voice can erupt from the corner there and say, "Listen to Rabbi Cantor. He is right in all that he said." Or you could say, "I now decree pork is kosher." I mean, what am I supposed to do? Divine voice, right? Okay, so Rabbi Adimi from Haifa says, "From the day that the temple was destroyed, prophecy was taken from the prophets and given to the sages." Okay. Really? Says it? Are you saying a sage is not fit to be a prophet? I mean, why not the sages? They should be prophets, right? Okay. Here's what Rav Adimi is saying. Even though prophecy was taken from the prophets, it was not taken from the sages. Okay, now we're totally misinterpreting it and changing it to the exact opposite of what he was saying. Okay? Tamimar said, it's not that prophecy is taken away, but the authority of prophecy is taken. They retained the authority of prophecy without actually being prophets. Okay? And Mamar said, a sage is greater than a prophet, as it said, and a prophet has a heart of wisdom. He's wise. When comparisons are drawn, compared to whom? Well, you must say that the lesser is compared to the greater. Here too, prophecy is compared to wisdom, indicating wisdom is greater than prophecy. Okay, see how they're building this? Rabbi says, know this, the sages still enjoy the prophetic gift. As a great man makes a statement with regard to one of halacha, and the same statement is then cited in the name of a different great man according to his statement, indicating the statements makes their statements by way of prophecy. Aha! Here's how you know this prophecy. Sage A makes a statement, the law is X, and way over on the other side of the country and years earlier or later, Sage B says, oh, the law is X. The fact that both of them came up with the same answer in different places means they must have gotten that answer from God. How else could you explain that both came up with the same answer? Right? Yeah. Rabbi disagrees. He says, no. Look. What's the difficulty? Perhaps they were born under the same constellation. Maybe they had the same mazal. Maybe they had the same luck. Maybe they had the same thinking patterns. Maybe like they were both using the same logic. Is it possible for two people to come up with the same idea and not be divinely inspired? For example, not in here, Leibniz came up with calculus, but so did, who was it?
Newton.
Newton came up with calculus. And they didn't know each other, and they both came up with it independently. And Newton came up with it first, but Leibniz didn't know, and Leibniz was the first one to publish it, so he's the one we follow. No?
Well, but nobody knows that.
No,
Except for mathematicians.
right, I mean,
Everybody
but
thinks Newton.
yeah, but we use Leibniz's notation, I think. I forget. I don't know. I don't remember calculus. But the point is, both of them came up with it. Is it because both of them were spoken to by God, or is it that that's just the way math is? Or maybe they just came up independently with a great idea, right? First person to patent it. The whole point of a patent is anyone can figure this out, but you thought of it first. Okay? Rabbi says, no. As a great man makes a statement, and the same statement is then cited in the name of the well-known Tana, Rabbi Akiva Bar Yosef, in accordance with this statement. Okay. It certainly cannot be maintained that the first sage is similar in its nature to the illustrious Rabbi Akiva, right? So he must have arrived at the statement through prophecy. So if a lesser sage learned something, and he was anticipated by a greater sage, that has to be, because nobody compares to Akiva. So Akiva came up with this, and you, Pitzler, you came up with this? You must have been inspired by God, because you're nothing compared to Akiva. Right? Rav Ashi said, and what is the difficult explaining that? Perhaps they too were born under the same constellation. With regard to the first stage has the same understanding Rabbi came up. No, maybe he had like the same logic system. Both of them studied Rabbi Ishmael's 11 principles of derivation of law that we studied. Rather, Rav Ashi says, this is so. A great man makes a statement, and the same statement is cited as a halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai in accordance with his statement. I say, it's X. And someone else says, I have it from Mount Sinai, it was X. The sage makes a statement that corresponds to words pronounced in heaven, which without prophecy is beyond human capability. The Gemara says, but perhaps he arrived at the idea by chance. Without the assistance of prophecy, like a blind man who makes his way through a skylight. It's possible that a blind man can find his way out of a maze, right? Blind man cannot deliberately find the skylight because he can't see. Therefore, he finds it by chance. It could be possible you could accidentally come up with the right answer. Halacha. Like in The Good Place, where that one guy comes up with the system that everyone's done, and he just came up by a chance, and he was right. Doug Forsett came up with the system that of points used in The Good Place in heaven, but no one else came close. But does the sage not offer a reason for his statement? The fact that he demonstrates an understanding of the issue indicates that he does not arrive at the idea by chance, but rather by prophecy. Okay? So, take away from this, when the sage tells you something, it's not a voice from God talking, but it's God talking through the sage. If it wasn't prophecy, the sage wouldn't be right. Okay?
It doesn't matter how he came to that conclusion.
Well, he gives the reasons. But, okay. We're building. So let's look at some commentaries on Bava Batra. So that was Bava Batra 12a. Now let's look at some commentaries on that bit of Talmud. Right. So the Talmud doesn't explain why the scholar is superior over the prophet. Right. So here's Joseph ibn Migash. A Maimar added, indeed, a Chacham is superior to a prophet. Said Ravashi, it can be proven from instances where a great man states something and then an identical statement is quoted from a tradition given to Moses at Sinai, even though this individual had never heard the statement previously. A Chacham is thus superior to a prophet, for a prophet only relates that which he heard and that which was placed in his mouth to repeat, while a Chacham relates a tradition given to Moses at Sinai, even though he never heard it. By the way, the same thing works with Kabbalah, right? How do you become a student of Kabbalah? Kabbalah is called Kabbalah. Well, what's Kabbalah means? What's Kabbalah? The word,
literal
Hebrew, yeah. Well, where else do we hear a word like Kabbalah?
I only know it when we have a musical Shabbat, so.
Kabbalat Shabbat.
Yeah.
Good. Kabbalat Shabbat is receiving the Sabbath. Kabel is to receive. For example, an object that can become tameh, that can become impure, is something mekabelet tuma. It receives. Okay? Kabbalah is received wisdom. You can't go to the teacher and say, teach me Kabbalah. You have to go to the teacher and say, this amazing thing came to me. And this is what it is. And the teacher says, oh, that's Kabbalah. Let me help you get deeper. Right? You can't go to learn Kabbalah unless you already know it independently, because it came to you in prophecy. What they're saying here is the sage is having the knowledge from an independent means, and it must be from God. Right? It's like the kid who, if a kid sits down and starts writing out the rules for calculus, and he's never studied Leibniz or Newton or anything, just figures it out on his own. Isn't that from God? Wouldn't you say that this guy is tapping into the genius of the universe?
But in this case, these guys have all studied the same thing, they've had this.
But they're
stream
saying,
of-
but they're saying maybe they didn't. Okay. By the way, did you guys ever watch Ted Lasso?
I don't get
I
that.
don't get it.
I would.
So there's this scene in Ted Lasso where he's at a restaurant and he's watching a video of Charles Barkley and his team and Charles Barkley, whatever. And the way everything's about triangles. And he's up all night, he's in this zone and God's talking to him. And he comes up with a whole strategy of playing soccer based upon interactive triangles. And he shows it to the other coach. The other coach looks at it. Did you come up with it on your own? He says, yeah. He says, yeah, do you have a name for it? He says, no. He says, you should call it total football. Why should you call it total football? Because in 1972, so-and-so came up with this system called total football, and this is it. Okay, so Ted Lasso received this wisdom from the universe, but someone else had already written it down, but he had never read it.
But he hadn't played soccer before or seen much soccer, but all of a sudden he's been watching a whole bunch of soccer being played.
Right, but he's getting inspiration from somewhere. The point is that it was like nevuah. It was like inspiration. Okay. Nachmanides. Okay. He wants to. He wants to say, prophets are also scholars. The Talmud made a statement: since the day the temple was destroyed, although prophecy was lost to the prophets, it was not lost to the Chachamim. It was explained by Rashi. Lost to the prophets who were not Chachamim. So, if a prophet was also Chacham, then he still had prophecy. If you're a wise prophet, you still have prophecy. Against this, one may cite the statement in Nedarim: God causes his Shekinah to dwell only on someone who is wise, strong, and wealthy, implying that not all prophets are necessarily sages. They could just be wealthy, right? Some answer: God causes his Shekinah to dwell only on someone who is wise, refers to a continuous state of prophecy. In the case of prophecy for conveying a message, such as that of Jonah, which is merely temporarily, the Shekinah can indeed dwell upon the pious, even though they're not a Chacham. Jonah was not wise. However, I'm not satisfied. The Talmud here means to say that although the prophecy of the prophets by means of image and vision was lost, the prophecy of the sages by means of intellect was not lost. Rather, they know the truth from the Holy Spirit which dwells within them. In other words, intelligence is from God. Okay. Now, we still need to make the case that rabbinic law should be binding laws. Right? The Torah says this, but the rabbi said, where in the Bible does it say I have to wait 6 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour? Right? Come on, where is that? And the whole thing with chicken, okay, that's not in the Bible at all. And by the way, the Bible, when it's forbidding meat and milk, it's only talking about animals that are fit to be sacrificed. It's not talking about non-sacrificial animals. Like a deer, you can have the sacred fats of a deer, because there are no sacred fats of the deer, because you can't offer a deer on the altar, therefore nothing sacred about it. Okay, come on, why should I listen to these rabbis? Okay? Shimon bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the words of the scribes are as dear as the matters of Torah. Why? Your palate is like fine wine. Song of Songs. The scholars said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the words of the scribes are dearer than matters of Torah. The scribes, their sayings are more beloved, more important than Torah. Really. Rabbi Abba bar Kahana, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Paz, derived from this. Rabbi Tarfon said, I was once coming on the road and I stopped to recline to recite the Shema in accordance with the statement of Ben Shammai. Okay, Ben Shammai and Hillel have different opinions as to how to say the Shema. The Shema says you should say these words when you get up and when you go to bed, when you lie down and when you rise up. Hillel says, when it says when you lie down and when you rise up, it means at the time of lying down, at the time of rising up. Where Shammai said, no, lying down is you should lie down to say it. I reclined to recite the Shema in accordance with the statement of Ben Shammai. It was time to say the Shema, and I lay down flat on the ground to say the Shema. I endangered myself due to robbers. They came and they beat me up because I was lying down on the road. Okay. They said to him, you deserve to forfeit your person for you transgressed the words of Ben Hillel. You deserve that because you weren't following the halacha, and the halacha goes by Hillel and not by Shammai, even though Shammai is more literally correct. He thought Shammai was more correct because it's more literal. You see, had he refrained from reciting it, he would have merely violated a positive command. If he had not said the Shema at all, he would have violated the command of saying the Shema, because it was time to say the Shema and he didn't say the Shema. But no, he did say the Shema, obeyed Torah law, but by reclining, he transgressed rabbinic law. Therefore, he's liable to lose his life. That is, the words of the scribes are dearer than matters of Torah. You need to expand that, right? Okay. The punishment for disobeying the rabbis is more severe than the punishment for disobeying the Torah. The punishment for breaking Shabbat is not as great as the punishment for breaking the rules of muksa, which is the rabbi's fence around Shabbat. Okay? Now, of course, who's implementing the system here? Rabbi Hanina said, Ben Ada, said in the name of Tanchum ben Aha, they are more stringent than matters of Torah and prophecy. Do not preach, they preach, Micah says. This is analogous to a king who sent officials to the provinces. Regarding one he wrote, if he shows you my seal and my insignia, trust him, but if not, do not trust him. Regarding the other one he wrote, even if he does not show my seal and my insignia, trust him.
Sounds like a conflict.
I've got Agent A, who's got the seal and this. You better verify with him that he's really from me. The other guy, he's from me, you can trust it. You don't need to show the seal. So too, regarding prophecy is written, if a prophet will arise in your midst, regarding the words of the scribes is written, on the basis of the Torah they will instruct you. That the Torah will instruct you is not written here, but rather they will instruct you. Okay? The prophet arises in your midst, okay? But scribes on the basis of the Torah that they will instruct you. Not the Torah that the Torah instructs you, not the Torah but the Torah that they instruct you. And the judgment they will say to you, you shall do. You shall not deviate from the matter that they will tell you, right or left. Remember that phrase? Don't deviate right for left. If they tell you that the right is the right and the left is the left, heed them. And even if they tell you that the right is the left and the left is the right, you still heed them. Chutzpah, right? Big chutzpah. Okay. I want to submit a document to the court. I want to file a document. The rules of the court say it should be in this format: A, B, C, D, E. But I know that in the past, judges have accepted it if it went A, B, F, C, E. I'm going to submit the document A, B, F, C, E, because that's what the judge wants. I don't care. He doesn't care what the law written down is. It's what the judge wants. And in fact, I have a sneaking suspicion that if I write it down A, B, C, D, E and submit it, and the judge looks at it and says it's out of sequence, and I say, but I'm just following what the rules say, the judge is going to say, that's very nice. If you want it in this court, you will have it A, B, F, C, E. Yep. Yeah. So when in Manitoba, when they simplified the rules of court, they had a problem. Everyone was terrified to follow the new rules because they knew that the old world rules worked. And the new rules said, don't call it a vehicle, just call it a car. Just call it a car or truck. It's like motor vehicle. Okay, just, they were because, okay? If the judge tells you, this is the way I want it, this is the way I want it, right? Okay? Because the judge, the law is, as famous jurists have said, the Supreme Court the words that they say are supreme because they're the ones who are saying it. Okay. Okay.
But back to
Yep.
your initial comments about the biggest bully.
Yep.
So,
Well, that's a different lecture.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing. I mean, it's the rabbi.
Of course, the
the-
rabbis
the
are
head-
bullies.
but-
In
but-
fact, we're going to
but-
see
but
two
the-
stories of bullies.
Okay, I'll
Okay?
wait for my
You want a
comments later.
big bully story? Okay, two stories. First is Moses and Rabbi Akiva's academy. Okay, you've heard the story before. Moses is, up there with God, and God's writing on the Torah, putting little crowns on the Torah, little crowns on the letters. Certain of the letters have little crowns. Do you know what I'm talking about? So like,
Yeah, I do
so
know.
like, you do.
I do.
So, sometimes you have the letter shin. And it'll go like this. Crowns. And I've seen some Torahs where they have crowns like that. So pretty. Okay. What are the crowns for?
It's a special word.
Moses says, what are the crowns for? God says, someday there's going to be a sage called Rabbi Akiva, and he's going to make up mounds of law out of those crowns. So Moses says, show me his classroom. He goes to the classroom, they seat him in the back row, and Rabbi Akiva is teaching, and Moses is like not following the argument. He doesn't understand a thing that it's saying. And one of the students says, how do we know this? Rabbi Akiva says, because this is something taught by God to Moses at Mount Sinai. And Moses is like, okay, I get it now. I'm the beginning of a transmission. Even though I might not recognize what comes at the end. It's kind of great. And Moshe says, Moses says, Master Universe, you have a man as great as Rabbi Akiva? You thought to give the Torah through me? Why did you do that? God says, be silent. It's what I want to do. Moses is Master of the Universe. You show me Rabbi Akiva's Torah. Show me his reward. So Moses goes back and he sees that they're weighing out Rabbi Akiva's flesh in the butcher shop because he's been tortured to death by the Romans. And Moses is Master of the Universe. This is Torah and this is the reward. And God says, be silent. This is what I want to do. Okay, so that's a bull. Do not look for this to be happy. Now, most famous story of the rabbis ever. I'm going to give you the extreme short version. You have it written down here. Rabbi Eliezer is trying to prove that this oven is kosher, and everyone else says it's not. And Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, let miracles happen. And miracles happen. The tree flies through the air, the water flows backwards, the walls fall in. Rabbi Joshua says, hey, stay out of it. The walls stop halfway. They don't fall further out of respect for Rabbi Joshua. They don't go back up. Okay, so finally he says, like, God prove that I'm right. And a bat kol, remember those? A voice from heaven opens up and it says, why are you disagreeing with Rabbi Eliezer as the halacha is in accordance with his opinion in every place that he expresses an opinion? God says, why are you disagreeing with this guy? Clearly he has my nevuah. And Rabbi Joshua says, lo b'shamayim he. It's not in heaven. The Torah is not so far away that you say it's in heaven, I can't get it. It's not so far away that you say it's across the sea, I can't. No, the Torah is right here for you to do, it says in Deuteronomy. And the argument Rabbi Joshua is saying is, in your Torah, you said to us, we decide the Torah, not you. In the words of Aristotle, you're the prime mover, you pushed it, now you're done. We get to do the work. Okay? You created the product. This is old-fashioned Hollywood, okay? You wrote the novel, you sold me the novel, I'm making the movie, I don't care what you think. You may be the author, you may be the writer of the book, but I don't care. I'm making my movie. It's either gonna succeed or it's gonna suck. But you, I don't care what you think. That's Hollywood. That's the rabbis. Oh my God. Is Hollywood that way because they were Jewish? I don't know. I have a book that I absolutely adored the book. And she sold the rights and they were gonna make it into a movie and they didn't consult her. And it was like a first-time director and he missed the whole point of it. And the movie was so bad that it was shown once before Cannes opened and then never shown again. And it will never be seen. And that just had a great cast. God's behaving badly by Marie something or other. And it had Christopher Walken, it had Alicia Silverstone, it had Rashida, the Cosby wife actress, it had all these great actors. And it was brilliant casting. But the thing is, he didn't understand the book, and he didn't know how to direct, so it was a terrible movie. And she had no influence on it. It's like the writer of The Witcher. You know, he's not a book. Okay, so the world is like a Hollywood movie. God wrote the novel, but the rabbis are the producers.
And they don't have to listen to that.
Oh my God.
Make their own idea.
He can't come up with new ideas. I'm sorry, you know. Okay, look. What did God say when challenged on this? Nitzchuni banai, my children have overcome me. I've been defeated. God's saying, I had that same feeling. And it's a fantastic feeling. When you're playing chess with your kid and your kid checkmates you and you didn't let him win. Isn't that great? It's, wow, I got defeated. This is fantastic. Okay? That's the story, right? They decided to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer. They send Rabbi Akiva to go tell him. Rabbi Akiva tells him. Rabbi Eliezer goes into mourning, and you know, he's a miracle guy, right? He's crying. 1/3 of the olives are spoiled, 1/3 of the wheat, 1/3 of the barley. If you were kneading dough, it's spoiled in your hands. Rabbi, anything he looked at was burned. Again, my argument is that Superman's creators were thinking of Talmudic stories when they thought about heat vision, okay? Rabban Gamliel is on a boat coming home and a wave is coming to capsize him. And what does Rabban Gamliel say? He says, seems to me. He says, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe. It is revealed and known before you that neither was it for my honor that I acted when we excommunicated him, nor was it for the honor of my house. Rather, it was for your honor, God. I don't know if this is throwing under the bus or not. It was for you, so that disputes will not proliferate in Israel, and the sea calmed, therefore showing that the sea agreed. In other words, the rabbis say, we need to have a mechanism for determination with certainty. I have to know that a yes is a yes and a no is a no. And I can't have some random creator of the universe popping in and overruling me. okay? We need to have a Supreme Court, and the buck has to stop there. Canada used to have this problem. You could appeal from the Supreme Court to the Judicial Committee of the House of Lords in England, and they could overrule. And Canada got irritated by that, because why are these guys in England making rules for Canada? We're our own independent country, god damn it. So they said, you know something? We will be our own deciders. Okay? Whether they're right or whether they're wrong, it's final, right? The Supreme Court is by definition correct. They're not irrefutable because they're always right. They're always right because they're the Supreme Court. Okay?
They can still appeal.
Yeah.
Well,
Once you get to the Supreme Court, that's it. That's it. You're done. You're done.
But then there could be a new Supreme Court sometime in the future that could overrule
Overturn
the original.
But not your case. A new case, and the rule might be different for them, but your case is not going to be revisited.
Well, probably because you're dead at this time.
Probably, but your case will not be revisited. I'm sorry, it's just
Well,
not.
how about Roe v.
going to
Wade? That was
I was just gonna
revisited.
say, what about really?
Roe v. Wade
Versus
about
Wade.
abortion.
No, that wasn't revisited. All the people who had abortions before then weren't suddenly turned around and prosecuted after the fact.
Oh.
Were they? None of them were prevented from having the abortions that they had. No, the reversal is only going forward, not going backwards. Okay. There's a last text here, which is Maimonides excluding prophecy again, and he writes nicely so you can read it. And Avraham Isaac Cook, the Chacham, is superior to the prophet. He talks about poets and poetry, and again he writes it beautifully so you can look at that. But basically the notion here is that in terms of authority, the rabbis have carved out authority for themselves so that they are the be-all and end-all of rabbinic law. Right? And they've kind of bullied their way into it. And certainly what happens with Rabbi Eliezer, that's bullying, right? They didn't have to do that to him. They could have just accepted that he was right. They knew he was right. They were making a point. They were purposely saying, this is how we can prove that we have authority. And the system stood up for them. And even God stood up for them. There you go. Okay, now your comments about bullying.
Well, I mean, ultimately you need an enforcer.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, if you look at the rabbis today,
Mhm.
in Israel, there's an enforcer.
The state.
The state is enforcing it. In America, the rabbinic courts will speak, and a good number of Jews will laugh and keep on going in their direction because
Right.
they don't, the political authority is not
The-
there.
The Jewish community is divided in two in the United States. There's the Orthodox community, and there's everyone else.
But ultimately.
The
people have to
enforce,
want it.
I understand. The enforcement mechanism of the Orthodox community is follow our rules or leave our community. And people choose to leave the community, and that only makes their community stronger. But there's lots of people within Orthodoxy who follow the rules because they have no choice. And they just go along because it's much better to be within the system than to be outside the system. Those of us here who are outside the system made peace with it. But those of us outside of the system recognize we are a voluntary organization. And Federation, which is self-appointed and claims to lead us, they're self-appointed and we're free to ignore them. And the JCs, we're free to ignore them too. In the foundation, we're free to ignore them. In the synagogue, I don't like what you're saying, I'll start my own synagogue, or I'll go somewhere else, or I'll fire the rabbi. Okay? So we're all volunteers out here, right? And that's okay, we find meaning in it. We're not living within a legal system. We, if I have a dispute with you, I never have a dispute. I'm not gonna take you to the Beit Din of the Rabbinical Assembly, okay? The joint Beit Din. Okay, I'm gonna take you to the Court of Common Pleas or whatever the equivalent is here. Inside that world, you're gonna take it to the rabbis. You're not gonna go to an outsider to intervene. And within that system, what they've done where they've controlled the politics and they've subverted, public monies to their own ends because they're the majority is embarrassing for those of us out here, but totally cool for those who are inside.
It's not okay, but I mean, it is what it is.
It's okay for them.
I,
From their point of view, it's okay. I mean, look, if you have a philosophy that how you view something depends upon how you were raised and what values you have. Okay? It upsets us that in China, dogs are also a meal. It upsets us in France that horses are also a meal. But understand, in India, it upsets them that cattle work. Okay? Because cows are just as lovable and just as intelligent as dogs, or horses, or deer. The thing is, culturally, I have no trouble, beautiful deer, shooting it, skinning it, gutting it, chopping it up, roasting it, and eating it. Whereas I probably don't want to do that with, a dog. I do it with a squirrel, or not me personally. I'm doing it, but the squirrel, the possum, the goat, the turtle, the monkeys, even whatever. But dogs, no, I love dogs. You never get a dog, horrible, or people. But for people who are brought up in different cultures, they have different assumptions. They've got different. And so, within the Orthodox world, they have a certain worldview. I can't say whether it's good or bad. I think it's bad, but I'm not from within that worldview.
Wouldn't you want to have the power that a Orthodox rabbi has? That when you say something that's religious law, that all your congregants would obey that?
Why would I want that?
Okay,
Why
sense
would
of
I
power.
want, you want me to be the Melech HaMashiach, the King Messiah? I have no desire to be a tyrant, which is what you're describing, okay?
No, but we've all agreed that you can be that tyrant.
I can be the tyrant on matters that in the big scheme of things don't matter. You're voluntarily submitting to my leadership on stuff that push comes to shove. It's not like I'm controlling your income, your rent. Okay, I'm trying to control your food, but even then, okay, or your diet. But God forbid everyone should listen to what I say. I'm just trying to nudge people along, right? I mean, the Pope, the poor Pope, right? He's got a problem now. There's a cardinal who has been disagreeing with him. Now he has to evict the cardinal from his house. Everyone's very sad for the cardinal because he's been evicted. It's in today's paper. It's like, I'm also not responsible for all of the terrible things that Jews do. Okay, the Pope is responsible for all the terrible things that priests have done and nuns and all those things, right? Because Buck's, he should have known, he was in charge, I'm not in charge, okay? I'm not even in charge of the policies of this building, okay? It's like, wait, I saw a video, someone sent, the difference between the Sephardic and the Ashkenazic. And have you seen the video? And how they view their rabbis, right? Here's the Sephardi talking about his rabbi. My Rabbi, he's the best Rabbi.
It's so great.
Smart.
Video.
He
It's a whole
knows.
series,
He
yeah.
knows Torah. He knows Mishnah. He knows Talmud. He knows Halacha. He knows Kabbalah. He is so wise. He's the best rabbi ever. And the Ashkenazic is, the rabbi's such a putz. Like, why is he even at the board meeting? I'm more of a rabbi than he's a rabbi. I mean, come on, you know, okay? That's our point of view, okay?
You're watching TikTok, you're watching Instagram.
Uh-oh, it was hot.
Yeah, it's a great statement, it really is. But you know what, Rabbi, you control a lot here that I would never take on a decision for.
I think you're an influencer more than a
it-
controller.
So the rabbi is to the congregation as a parent is to the family. The job of the parent is to educate and enable and empower so that the family can expand out and make their own families later. My job, I have my job because odds are, it's not necessarily true, but odds are I know more about the prayer service, the Torah, and the tradition than you do. That's my authority, right? You want me to know more than you do. However, if I come across, what's his name, Leo, the grammar guy, who shows up like 4 times a year.
Oh, from here?
Yeah. Like,
Oh.
he used to teach at the university. He's like, he knows his grammar, like his Hebrew, like, oh my God, so precise, right? I'm not sure, I don't feel threatened by that. It's like, yeah, might go to him with a question, right? But you guys come to me because you view me as a source of wisdom. And my job is to try to guide you. I'm a coach. I'm not a tyrant. Okay, I might be a tyrant in the kitchen, but
The coach is a really good analogy, because it's like, you could lose the locker room when you're a coach, if you go too far, you push too, and it's sort of like that.
And the rabbis have that concept, puchazi. Go out and look and see what people are doing. A rabbi is not allowed to issue an edict that the people will not observe, because it brings the whole structure into disrepute. Okay, so I can't, if I know that nobody's going to do something, I can't say you must do this. It'd be foolish. I could say it has been done this way. The preferred practices. This is a goal to work towards, but I can't say you must do this, because if I were to say, for example, if you want to be a member in good standing of this congregation, you need to stop eating pork. That's very nice. They're going to have an emergency meeting, and the people who keep kosher are going to be the first ones to vote to get rid of them, because I've upset the system.
But we used to have Friday night potluck dinners.
Yep.
And they were very successful. And then we had a rabbi who said, no, you can't have potluck dinners.
We should
And now we have potluck dinners again.
We do?
Yeah.
Well, it's coming up.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
And they're very successful. I mean, we
We
just
have so many things
Right,
going on around.
But please understand, for that potluck to happen, certain protocols need to be in place.
Yeah, dairy only.
And
Nothing comes in.
nothing comes into the kitchen.
So is there a scenario in a modern Jewish synagogue where somebody can be thrown out? Again, besides not paying your dues, but I mean,
Of course.
what could I possibly do that would make you throw me out? I wanna
Threaten
know.
somebody.
Threaten
The
somebody.
okay.
Threaten somebody.
The Synagogue Association, now I'm putting on my lawyer cap, okay? The synagogue is a voluntary organization that has dues and membership. And theoretically, it has the ability to exclude people from membership for whatever reason it wants. The bylaws might have some things in it. Or once upon a time, certain bylaws would say if you intermarried, you couldn't be a member anymore. Or if you broke, or if you didn't show up at services enough times, they could kick you out. You know, whatever any organization is allowed to set its rules for membership. And any organization is allowed to enforce that, and any organization is free to get rid of someone. And I would say that if the synagogue wanted to exclude someone from membership, at the next board meeting, someone puts forward a motion, says, I move, seconded by so-and-so, that Bob be stripped of his membership and excluded from our organization. And let's take a vote. All those in favor, aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Bob, you're out. Sorry.
So if I beat up Sandy, I can imagine that they would do that.
Sure.
But short of that, I mean, what?
You wouldn't even have to beat
For
me up.
matters of
All you would have to
observance.
say is, you did something I don't like, I'm gonna come to your house and
If-
kill you.
Look, these are all
Okay.
theoreticals, right?
Yeah.
If
Which you would never do.
again, these are all theoreticals. If one of our members comes to Jesus and really wants us all to come to Jesus and starts proselytizing and disrupting services, we're more than welcome to say, guy, don't come here anymore, and we want to get a restraining order to prevent you from showing up because you're making us miserable. Or, I mean, I've been in communities where this fellow, it was a very bad divorce. And when he showed up, they wouldn't prevent him from coming in, but they wouldn't give him an aliyah, and they wouldn't count him in the minyan. If they had 10 people and he was number 10, they'd say, we don't have a minyan. That was their way of showing their displeasure. So, you know, he kind of stopped coming. Because, you know, you can make life miserable for someone in different ways.
I've been in a community where they didn't count me in the minyan too.
But
Anyway.
yeah,
I
that's-
know,
There was,
that's just a
there
little
was a
aside.
time, if you had the synagogue that I was, my parents helped build, I didn't, but if you had a non-kosher reception after a wedding or a bar mitzvah, they could refuse you bar mitzvahing your child and marrying your child. Yeah,
Wow.
and, yeah,
Oh,
well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
sure, yeah, and that's using, but it's there, they've got something that you want.
Yeah.
So I had it at home
If
and
you
made
want,
kosher
here
anyway.
here we go. If you want to have a bar mitzvah in this town, with a rabbi who lives in this town, at a synagogue that is in this town, we don't care where you do it, but you must have 5 years of Hebrew school education, 3 days a week plus Shabbat. If you don't have that, you can't have a bar mitzvah. And as long as all the synagogues are willing to enforce that, that's what happened.
Mhm.
And now, what happens today?
They don't enforce it.
They don't care. It's like, first of all, 2 days education, a 1 day education, no day education. Secondly, it's like, I don't even want to have the bar mitzvah at the synagogue. I'm gonna hire a rabbi, and we're just gonna go in the backyard. Forget the rabbi, I'm just gonna go in the backyard. I'm just gonna celebrate the bar mitzvah at the spa.
The 13th year.
So, when you have a monopoly on something, and you have control of something, you can enforce things. When there's options, you lose the ability, and now you can no longer force people to do things, you have to convince people to do things. So it used to be, I could say, I used to be, I mean, like 100 years ago, don't, you have to keep kosher because it's the law. Now I say you should keep kosher because it'll make you a better person.
Because before.
It still made you a better person, but that wasn't necessary.
100 years ago, you could throw people out of the community and they couldn't assimilate into a different community. So
Yeah, there's
they were
nowhere else
really
to go.
isolated, you know?
There's nowhere else to go.
And that's, I guess where I'm going with this whole thing is that now that assimilation is so possible for us, or at least the illusion of assimilation is possible for us, it makes all of this seem very strange and irrelevant.
Right, because we're talking about sources of authority, and the answer is the rabbi no longer has authority. And what is true is a person only has as much authority as you give them. Right? So the reason I have authority in the synagogue is that you all have voluntarily agreed to give me that authority. And you are able at any time to withdraw that agreement and to withdraw that authority. Right? It's like everyone listens to the leader until everyone decides nobody's going to listen to them anymore. And guess what? The leader is now powerless. They're barking orders and nobody's paying attention.
We're kind of seeing this in real time, with the mob looting and things like that, and nobody's stopping anybody, there's no enforcement, and the word is getting out.
So crowds tend to be self-enforcing of rules. So when 40 or 50,000 Winnipeggers flood Portage and Main and Winnipeg, the streets, and they're celebrating because it can't be the Jets because they're never going to win the Stanley Cup, but they're celebrating because the Blue Bombers have yet again won the Grey Cup. You only need 150, maybe 200 police officers to control 40,000 people.
But that's here.
That's here too.
Yeah.
Because when the police officer says, I need you guys to start moving over there, all the other people there are gonna convince the others to conform, right? Because they're sheep, they're gonna conform. But once the crowd gets it in mind that, hey, we don't need to listen to them at all, that's when, they overwhelm, okay? All those officers on the January 6th could not control that crowd because that crowd was not controllable. It was like an invading army, okay? There was a loss of authority there. Humans prefer to live within systems of authority because it's more predictable. We like predictability. I like to know if I walk down the street, I'm not going to be randomly shot. People self-inhibit because if you do that, then all of society will fall apart. But yeah, the old rules of authority are breaking down. And we're seeing that at the highest levels because the people who are being elected to positions of authority are not necessarily people who command authority without having those positions. Or they're demagogues. It's very interesting and concerning.
Maybe not live in interesting times.
And the Chinese never said that.
They
but
should have.
They could have. We are returning to a sense of true democracy where everybody has a voice. And what they discovered in Greece, as far as I understand, and in Rome, is true democracy is a terrible system because the mob has an average intelligence. And anyone who is, this is my theory, anyone who's above intelligence, anyone who's above average is always going to be in the minority. And you need the majority to win. So what you need to do is you need to have elites. You need to have, in Canada, I love that they have a primary system here. The voters are not necessarily the best. I mean, you should give people a choice. You should give people good choices. And in Canada, if you want to run for parliament for a party, the party is not a public thing. The party is a private organization, and they get to choose who they want to run in your riding because, you know, there's an image to maintain. Right? I mean, there's nothing stopping me from registering as a Republican or a Green or a Democrat or whatever, putting my name up for a primary, being very attractive to people, a lot of people, and there's nothing stopping me from running as the Republican candidate or the Green candidate or the Democratic candidate or the Communist candidate. So there's no Communist Party here. If there is, then you're in trouble. But there is, but you know, they still don't want you. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and the Green Party has no ability to vet me because I won the primary. Anyone can enter, which is an abdication of leadership. There's been an abdication of leadership by the parties. They're being so democratic, and when you are this democratic, you, not to insult the vast majority of people in this country, I'm happy to insult the vast majority of people in this country, the lowest common denominator is always going to win. And as Alan Shepard thought to himself, I love Alan Shepard, I really do. I read his, I don't read biographies, I read his biography, I like this guy. I said to him, Alan, the first American to orbit. You're on top of this rocket. What's going through your mind as you're about to launch? What do you think he's done? What went through his mind at that moment is every single component of this rocket, on which my life depends, which contains stuff that is super explosive, was built by the lowest bidder. That's what he thought.
Interesting.
Everything was built by the lowest bidder. Wow.
But it worked. For
That
him
time,
anyway.
that time.
That time.
Right. So there are certain things you can't do as a rabbi, like marry a Jew and a non-Jew, right? If you did that, you would lose your accreditation, right, within the United States.
Okay. So there you go. I'm still a rabbi. Can never take that away from me, right? Because, you know, however, my membership in the rabbinic assembly would be, I would be called out before the Vad HaKavod, the ethics committee, and they would say, David, you did something bad that is incompatible with continued membership in our organization. We have a committee on law and standards. We only have 3 standards and you screwed up on one of them. And I'd say, great, I don't have to pay you money anymore. That's fine. And they'll list me as someone who was kicked out of the rabbinical assembly. Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah.
if a synagogue hired you after that, then they could be kicked out of United Synagogue, the whole synagogue.
Well, yes and no. Because United Synagogue,
It's not United. Or a synagogue.
not like the Holy Roman, Okay, you should turn this off before I say this.
And we have to.
Should have turned it off about an hour ago, but that's fine, okay?
We can edit it.
We can edit it. We can ask
Just
forward it.
at the end of the class.